Today I want to tell you a story that runs deep. It's about Kai, a young Apache man, captured, beaten, and silenced, and Emma, the daughter of the officer who gave the order. Two souls from opposite worlds drawn together by something neither expected, something stronger than fear. If this story touches your heart, please help us reach 1,000 subscribers. It means the world to me. Now let's begin. The wind swept over Coyote Ridge, with a mournful whistle dragging the scent of dry sagebrush, horse sweat, and gun oil along its path. Dust circled the flagpole at the center of the outpost and skittered like ghosts across the hard-packed earth between buildings. Behind the cavalry stables, in a crude holding pen made of mesquite posts and barbed wire, sat a man chained to the ground like an animal. He was Apache, that much was certain, though the soldiers simply called him the Hawk behind his back. His real name, they didn't care to ask. His hands were bound at the wrists, and an iron shackle looped around his neck, staked into the soil, with a spike meant for livestock. His shirt had long been torn away during capture. Scars and fresh lash marks marred the brown muscle of his bow and shoulders, but he sat upright, proud despite the pain. From the second-floor window of the command post, Emma Caldwell watched him. The golden-gray strands of her braid, wound neatly over one shoulder, shimmered like ash in the sun. Her dress, stiff ivory lace with imported buttons, clung awkwardly to her sides in the desert heat. It had arrived from Boston 2 weeks ago, intended for her engagement TL with Randall Givens. She hated it already. Kai, though she didn't yet know his name, hadn't moved in hours. Even when Lieutenant Rusk had struck him that morning for refusing to speak, he'd stayed silent. To the men, that silence meant arrogance. To Emma, it looked like dignity. Her older brother had gone silent too, in the final days before he walked out into the woods and never came back from Virginia. Sometimes silence said more than screaming ever could. That evening during dinner on the veranda, Colonel Horace Caldwell swirled his whiskey and said, "We should have just left him in the sun. Let the vultures save us the trouble." Emma pushed her peas into a tight line with her fork. "Was he armed?" "A knife," her father replied flatly. 10 inches of bone handle. That's all the savages need." She glanced up. He was alone. Her father's brow darkened. "You don't know their kind. One is a scout. 10 more hide behind rocks waiting." She knew better than to argue. "Still," she said softly, "he doesn't look like he's planning an ambush." Her father's eyes narrowed. "You'd do well not to look at him at all. Givens will expect a proper wife, not some frontier reformer." Her stomach twisted. Randall Givens was 50 and smelled of waxed mustache and condescension. Emma was 23, and though she'd been raised on etiquette and embroidery, something inside her had always longed for dust and thunder, not parlors and piano recitals. That night, the moon was a pale coin rising above the San Pedro cliffs. Her father and the officers were long abed. Only the crickets and coyotes kept watch. She crept down the back stairs in her riding boots, past the sleeping cook, and out into the yard with a tin cup in hand. The sentry at the far fence had dozed off chin to chest. She crossed to the holding pen. Kai looked up at her without surprise. In the pale light, his eyes were obsidian sharp, calm, unflinching. "I brought water," she whispered, holding the tin between the bars. He did not move at first, then slowly he reached out. His fingers brushed hers, warm, calloused, restrained, and he drank. Not like a beast, but like a man aware he was being watched. "I shouldn't be here," she said quietly. He handed the cup back and said nothing. "What's your name?" she asked. "Nothing." "You don't have to tell me," she added quickly, embarrassed by her own question. "I'm Emma." A beat passed. Then he spoke, voice low and raw. "Kai." The name curled in her mouth like smoke. She nodded once, her heart thudding. A sound behind her, The shuffle of boots. Miss Caldwell. She turned, pulse hammering. Corporal Mills stood with his rifle slung and a puzzled look on his face. "Ma'am, you ought not be down here." She straightened her back. "The prisoner was denied water all day. I was remedying that." Mills hesitated. "I don't think the colonel would approve." "No?" she said, brushing past him. "But I wasn't asking." Back in her room, she stood at the window again, watching the figure chained to the earth. He hadn't moved, but she knew he saw her. That night, she dreamt of him not in chains, but standing in a field of tall golden grass, carving a flute from cedar wood, while ravens circled overhead. In her dream, she walked toward him barefoot, and the dirt beneath her toes was warm. At dawn, the bugle sounded. Emma stood by the mirror, brushing her hair loose from its braid. The face looking back at her no longer seemed certain of its place in this world of polished silver and military schedules. Somewhere out there, chained and bruised, was a man who had said only one word and somehow told her everything. The world her father built was already beginning to crack. She just didn't know yet how far the pieces would fall. The morning sun painted everything gold, but inside the Caldwell house, the walls felt like polished stone, beautiful, but cold. Emma stood before her wardrobe, staring at the gown laid out for her. Lavender silk with pearl buttons. It had been chosen without her consent, delivered with an air of inevitability. Randall Givens's favorite color, of course. Her mother might have approved had she lived long enough to see it. But Emma's mother had died in St. Louis, her grave 1,000 miles away. No one asked what Emma wanted anymore. A knock came at the door. "You decent," her father's voice. She pulled the collar of her riding blouse closed. Yes, Colonel Horace Caldwell entered, already dressed for the day. His brass buttons caught the light, like medals of conquest. "You're to ride with Mr. Givens this morning. He's arranged for a photographer." Emma blinked. "A photographer for the engagement portrait? He wants it sent east." "Society papers, he says." Emma tried not to choke. "I haven't agreed to marry him." "You will," her father said evenly. "The West is no place for women alone. Randall is stable, influential, and generous with the regiment. He's twice my age and smells like gun oil and rosewater. He'll provide for you. That's more than most can offer." Emma bit her tongue until the iron taste filled her mouth. Later that morning, under the sharp blue sky, she stood beside Givens outside the chapel as the photographer arranged his tripod. Givens wore black with a crimson cravat. His beard neatly waxed, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back. "You'll make a lovely ornament," he whispered. "Refined, but not too spirited." Emma turned her face just enough to smile for the camera, and not an inch more. Afterward, Givens handed the photographer a silver dollar and escorted her back to the house. "I've arranged a dinner party," he said. 3 weeks from now. After that, we'll marry. The Reverend is on standby." "You sound like you're ordering supplies," she muttered. His grip on her arm tightened just for a second. Then he smiled. "Careful, darling. You'll find I'm very good at getting what I pay for." That night, Emma lit a single oil lamp and sat in her father's study. The drawer was unlocked, whether by carelessness or arrogance, she wasn't sure. Inside were maps, official letters, ledgers. She opened one and began to read. Land deeds, acquisition logs, notes in neat military script. Most were for parcels along the new rail line, but others marked in red were tribal lands. Apache names, signatures beside crude X's. And then she saw one Kai. Interrogate. Extract confession. Her breath caught. He wasn't a war scout. He was bait. A witness to something they didn't want known, or maybe just a name on a list that made someone money. She slammed the drawer, caused the echo ringing through her bones. At dawn, she walked down to the stables with a cloth bundle and a tin cup. The sentry was busy lighting a cigarette. She slipped behind the pen. Kai looked up. "I brought bread," she said. He studied her a long moment, then accepted it, without speaking. "I saw your name," she said, "in my father's ledger." His face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, a kind of weariness edged with sorrow. "I think they want you to confess to something," she continued, "whether it's true or not." "Truth doesn't matter," Kai said quietly. "Only silence." Emma crouched beside the fence. "Then why keep breathing?" He chewed slowly. "Because they haven't taken that from me yet." They sat in silence for a few minutes. She watched a hawk circle overhead. "Your name," she said. "It means something, doesn't it?" He nodded. "It means willow." Emma smiled faintly. "Willows bend, but they don't break." He looked at her then, and for the first time, she felt truly seen, not as the colonel's daughter, not as Gibbon's bride-to-be, but as someone alive and unfinished. "You should not be here," he said. "Neither should you." They heard boots approaching, heavy practiced. Emma stood and stepped away, just as Corporal Mills rounded the corner. "Miss Caldwell?" he asked, puzzled. She straightened. "Just bringing water." Mills glanced at Kai, then back at her. "Be careful, ma'am. Men like him, they remember who helped them." "I'm counting on it," she said, and walked away. Back in her room, she stood before the mirror and unbraided her hair. The pale strands fell like dusk against her shoulders. She didn't recognize the face that stared back at her, a girl balanced on the edge of a choice too big to name. Her world was lined in velvet and silver. But inside, something was breaking loose. She didn't know it yet, but the next time she came to Kai's pen, she wouldn't be bringing bread. She'd be bringing a key. The storm came just after midnight, not of rain, but of consequence. The moon vanished behind a haze of clouds, and the outpost settled into uneasy sleep. Inside the Caldwell house, every ticking clock seemed louder than usual, like fate tapping its foot. Emma lay awake, eyes on the ceiling, heart beating as though it knew something she did not. She rose silently and dressed not in silk, but in a plain riding blouse and trousers tucked into boots. Her mother would have gasped. Her father would have roared. But neither was watching now. In her hand, she held a brass key. She had stolen it hours earlier from her father's desk drawer, tucked beneath a stack of railway maps. It was small, worn smooth with use, and labeled only with a scrap of parchment, holding pen. Outside, the wind pressed through the cottonwoods, like a whisper, begging her to turn back. But she kept walking. The guards changed watch every 4 hours. For 30 minutes between rotations, there was only one man posted behind the stables. She had watched long enough to know his pattern, the slow pace of his boots, the way he paused to light his pipe. She waited until that moment. Moving through the shadows, Emma reached the holding pen. Kai was awake, sitting upright, as if he had known she was coming. "I don't have long," she whispered. He tilted his head, slightly unreadable. She knelt by the gate, slid the key into the lock, and twisted. It clicked like thunder in her ears. "Why?" he asked. Emma looked up at him, unsure if he meant the escape or something deeper. "Because I can't live in a world where this is justice." She pushed the gate open. Kai stood slow from days of hunger and bruises. He looked to the guard tower, then back to her. "They will come for you," he said. She nodded. "Then we'd better be gone before they do." They didn't run. That would draw attention. Instead, they walked quietly, deliberately past the farrier's shed and the rear paddocks, where a small wagon was hitched for morning supply runs. Emma had stashed water jerky and blankets in its bed earlier, hoping she would not lose the courage to use them. She offered him her hand as he climbed into the wagon bed. Kai hesitated, then took it. They rode in silence for nearly an hour, cutting east along the old trail, once used by fur trappers. The stars returned overhead, scattered like ash across the sky. After the 3rd mile, Emma exhaled for the first time. "You're bleeding," she said. Kai nodded. The cuffs tore skin. She reached back and handed him a cloth. "We'll find a place to stop soon." By dawn, they had reached a shallow arroyo dry from the summer drought. Emma led the wagon under a rock overhang, where the racing sun wouldn't find them easily. Kai leaned back against the stone and closed his eyes. Emma crouched beside him, dipping the cloth into a canteen and cleaning the wounds on his wrists. He flinched only once. "You said your name means willow," she said quietly. "I think you're more like stone. Nothing breaks you." His eyes opened. "Stone can still crack." She smiled, faint but true. "So can porcelain. Which do you think I am?" He didn't answer. Instead, he nodded toward her hand. "You risked everything." "I didn't think. I just acted." "Then thinking is what will save you now." A hawk circled overhead. Emma followed it with her gaze, then looked back down the trail they had come. "Givens will come," she said. "And my father. They won't let me disappear without a price." Kai's voice was even. "What will you do when they find us?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I couldn't leave you there." He looked at her a long time. "You don't belong in that world, Emma." "That's what I've started to believe," she said. "But I don't know where I do belong." He closed his eyes again, resting his head against the stone. "You'll have to decide that soon." They rested through the morning. At noon, Emma took the reins and guided the wagon deeper into the hills, where scrub pines grew thick, and no cavalry scout would bother to search without reason. She found a path marked only by stone cairns and followed it until the trail disappeared behind a wall of bramble. Kai spoke then. "We're near sacred land. Will they help us?" "They might help me." I don't know." Emma nodded. "Then let me help you get there. And if I can't stay, I'll leave you safe." At dusk they stopped to camp. She gathered wood while he built the fire. Together they shared a meal of hard bread and jerky in silence until Kai asked, "What do you see when you look at me?" Emma hesitated. At first a prisoner. Then someone who chose silence over surrender. Someone who wouldn't bow even when it cost him everything. He studied her face, and now she met his eyes. "Now I see a man. One I trust more than anyone I left behind." The fire cracked. He turned away. "Your trust will be tested soon." "I know," she said. "But I'd rather be tested than live untouched in a lie." That night, they lay under a blanket of stars back to back, not touching, but closer than either had ever allowed another soul in years. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was shared. And though neither dared say it, the choice had already been made. Tomorrow they would run farther. But tonight, they had escaped. Not just the fort, but the cages they'd carried inside themselves. The desert sun was cruel by mid-morning, scorching the dry red earth and painting the rocks in shades of fire. The wheels of the wagon creaked in protest as Emma guided it across the broken trail, steering carefully through a narrow gorge, lined with mesquite and scrub oak. Kai sat in the back, beneath a canvas tarp, silent, conserving energy. His wrists had scabbed, but still bled when the wagon jolted. Emma had offered to wrap them again, but he had only nodded and said later. They had made nearly 20 miles since dawn, following the old trapper's route toward the San Mayo Mountains. Kai had said a friend once kept a refuge near the foothills, a hidden basin where wild goats still roamed and water flowed in spring, if they could reach it. By late afternoon, their canteen was almost empty, and the wind had turned hot and metallic heavy, with the scent of something dead. Emma pulled the wagon to a halt, beneath the shadow of a towering boulder, and climbed down her boots, puffing red dust. "We need to rest," she said. "You're burning up." Kai didn't argue or argue. That alone scared her more than anything. She helped him down, her arm around his waist. He leaned heavier than before. They crossed to a patch of dry shade, and Emma eased him to the ground. He collapsed against the stone, sweat beating on his forehead, despite the chill in his limbs. "You're fevered," she said. He didn't reply. His eyes fluttered, then closed. Emma ran to the wagon, grabbed the last of the clean cloth and a tin of salve she'd taken from the outpost's infirmary. She soaked the cloth and pressed it to his brow. "Kai," she whispered, "stay with me." His breath rasped like wind through brittle leaves. For a moment, panic clutched her throat. This can't be how it ends. She worked methodically, washing his wounds, applying the salve, wrapping his wrists with the precision she'd learned from tending her brother's old cavalry injuries. Her hands shook, but her movements stayed firm. "You fought like this before," Kai murmured. Emma looked down. His eyes were open now, faintly glowing in the half-light. "My brother," she said. "He came home from Virginia with wounds no one could see. I tried to patch him up. He still didn't make it." Kai's gaze lingered on her. "But you didn't stop trying." She swallowed. "No." Night came slowly with a sky full of ash and rose. Emma built a small fire inside a ring of stones, shielding it with the wagon to avoid drawing attention. As the flames took hold, she handed Kai a tin of warm beans and sat beside him. "I know we can't go much farther without water," she said. "But we passed a canyon earlier. I think it may lead to a spring." Kai nodded, his strength returning in flickers. "I'll go at first light," she said. "You shouldn't go alone." "I won't leave you long." They ate in silence, watching sparks rise into the wind. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, answered by another. Later, as the fire burned low, Emma unrolled the bedroll and turned to offer it. But Kai shook his head. "You take it. You need it more." "I'm used to the cold." "So am I," she said. He hesitated, then moved aside. They lay side by side under the stars, the bedroll shared across their shoulders, the desert sky infinite above them. After a long pause, Kai said, "I dreamt of water last night. Cold, clear. My mother used to say, when you see it in your sleep, your body is close to failing." Emma turned toward him. "What else did she say?" "She said we are made of earth and story. And when one is wounded, the other must carry us until we heal." Emma looked up at the sky. "What story is carrying you now?" Kai closed his eyes. "The one we haven't written yet." She didn't answer. Her chest ached with something she couldn't name. Not quite fear, not quite longing, but something vast and uncontainable. She drifted off to sleep, listening to the rhythm of his breath beside her. She woke to the smell of smoke. Emma sat up fast. The fire had gone out, but the smoke wasn't from their camp. She turned toward the hills. In the distance, black plumes rose against the morning sky. "Kai," she hissed. He was already awake, crouched low, his eyes locked on the ridge above. "Riders, at least 3. They're sweeping the canyon," he said, looking for sign. Emma's blood went cold. How close? Close enough. They packed quickly. Kai tied the tarp over the wagon while Emma scattered ash and sand over their fire pit. She wiped away tracks with a mesquite branch. They pushed the wagon through a dry stream bed for nearly a mile before Kai raised his hand. "Wait," he said. They listened. Hooves. "Close now." "We need to go higher," he said. "Abandon the wagon." Emma stared at it. Everything they had was in that wagon. Food, blankets, supplies. Still she nodded. They stashed it beneath a deadfall and climbed the rocky slope, moving fast despite Kai's limp. At the top they found a cleft between boulders, just wide enough to crawl through. Inside, shadow, cool air, and silence. They crouched together, barely breathing, as the riders passed below. Emma caught a glimpse. Blue coats, polished boots, one man with a red sash. Gibbons' men. Her stomach twisted. She knew that sash. Randall Gibbons didn't just want her returned. He wanted her punished. She waited until the hoofbeats faded. Then turning to Kai, she whispered, "They're not stopping until they find us." Kai looked at her not with fear, but with something harder. Resolve. "Then we keep moving," he said. "And if they catch us, then we make sure it's not easy." Emma stared at him, her chest pounding. Not with fear, with something sharper, something like courage. By late morning, the sky had turned a bleached white, hazy with heat and dust. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged and pale, like bones rising from the earth. Emma and Kai moved through the high brush, careful to step only on stone or dry gravel, leaving no trail. Below them, a plume of dust trailed the riders still searching the canyon floor. "They're too close," Kai said, his voice low. Emma nodded. Her throat was raw from thirst. They hadn't found fresh water since the morning before. Her lips cracked when she spoke. "We need higher ground. Or cover." Kai studied the ridgeline. "There's a box canyon beyond that bluff. If we reach it before sundown, we might lose them in the rock." They pushed forward slower now, Emma stumbling once, when her boot caught a root. Kai caught her, his hands steady around her waist. For a moment, their eyes met, not with fear, but fatigue shared like breath between them. "Keep moving," he said softly. They crossed a dry wash and began climbing the bluff. The incline was steep, and the heat shimmered off the stone in whiffies. As they neared the crest, Kai raised his hand. "Wait." Emma froze. Voices faint but growing louder. Not soldiers. Something else. Then the crack of a rifle. Dirt exploded near Emma's foot. She dove behind a boulder, heart hammering. Kai pulled her down, just as another shot rang out. "They're above us," she hissed. Kai nodded. "Gibbons' men. Not army." A third shot ricocheted off the stone near his head. "We're pinned," Emma said. Kai looked around. "We have to split." She shook her head. "No. I won't listen to me," he said sharply. "They want you alive. Me they'll kill. You have to run north. There's a ravine. I'm not leaving you." "Emma, damn it. I didn't come this far, just to watch you die." He stared at her, frustration, admiration, and something unspoken flaring in his eyes. Then quickly he yanked the satchel from his shoulder and shoved it into her hands. "In there, the documents. Proof of what your father and Gibbons have done." She opened the flap and glimpsed papers, maps, signed orders, even a ledger page bearing her father's seal. "What is this?" "I took it from a trader who tried to bribe our elder. They were going to sell Apache land to the rail company. Force the tribes out. That's why they want me silenced." Emma's face paled. "My father knew. He didn't just know. He signed it." The words knocked the air from her lungs. Another shot rang out. This one closer. Kai grabbed her hand. "If they catch me, they'll burn everything. You have to get it out." "No," she said. "We're getting out together." Then came a scream. It wasn't either of them. A man, one of Gibbons's hired guns, staggered over the ridge, clutching his side. Blood poured between his fingers. A second figure emerged behind him, a man on horseback, face wrapped in cloth, rifle still smoking. Kai grabbed Emma's arm. "Come on." They ran while the gunmen were distracted, scrambling over loose stone into a narrow gap in the rocks. Behind them, more shouts. Footsteps. But they had moments. Precious moments. The gap opened into a shallow cave hidden from the ridge. They ducked inside, breathless, sweat-soaked. "We can't stay here long," Kai said. "But it'll give us time." Emma slid to the ground, clutching the satchel. "My father," she whispered. "He signed it. He knew they were stealing land. And I didn't want to believe." Kai knelt beside her. "You saw it. That's what matters. I don't know who I am anymore. He reached for her hand. Maybe you're someone becoming new. She looked at him, the blood on his face, the dirt on his clothes, the steadiness in his gaze. And in that moment, surrounded by fear and fire and betrayal, she felt something settle inside her. Not peace, but purpose. They waited until dusk, then slipped from the cave and circled wide around the gunman. The sun cast long shadows over the land, bleeding red over stone and thorn. They followed a game trail westward, deeper into the hills. After several hours, the ground leveled, and they stumbled into a dry basin. Emma's legs gave out, and she collapsed into the grass. I can't. Go farther, she gasped. Kai crouched beside her, opened the last canteen. Only a trickle remained. He poured it into her hands, not drinking himself. No, she whispered. You gave me freedom, he said. I'll give you water. She drank, then reached up and touched his jaw. Why are you still here? She asked. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? You could have run. Left me. Saved yourself. He looked at her for a long moment. Then softly. Because I meant what I said. We haven't written our story yet. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. We might not get the chance. We will, he said. But only if you keep fighting. She opened her eyes. I'm tired. I know. But you're stronger than they ever saw. Then from behind the ridge, a new sound. Drums, low, steady. Kai stood. We're closey. To what? He looked east. To the people who might save us. The drums echoed low through the cedar basin, reverberating off the stone, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Emma leaned against the side of the wagon, long abandoned now, just memory, and listened to the rhythm pulsing in the air, steady and solemn. They had arrived at the canyon mouth near nightfall, guided by faint markings carved into stone, and the scent of pine smoke riding the breeze. Kai had said little, but his eyes had grown more alert, more aware, as if each step into this sacred ground was a return to something deeper than safety, something older than pain. They were greeted not with weapons, but with silence. An old woman, her face carved by time and wind, stepped from the shadows and lifted her hand. Kai placed his palm against hers, and something passed between them that words could not hold. She is with you, the woman asked in halting English. Kai looked to Emma and nodded yes. The woman studied her long and slow. She carries no weapon. No, Kai said. But she carries truth. That night, they were given shelter in a low structure of adobe and cedar poles. Emma bathed in water, drawn from a hidden spring, her first wash in days. The bruises on her legs had turned purple. Her cheeks were sunburnt. But for the first time, she felt clean. She stepped into the firelight, wrapped in a blanket offered by one of the women. Kai sat cross-legged by the flames, a bowl of broth in his hands. He looked up and smiled softly. She sat beside him and took the bowl he offered. They call this place Willow's Hollow, he said. My mother used to bring me here to pray during drought years. It feels different, Emma said. Like the air remembers. He nodded. It does. They ate in silence, the kind born of peace rather than fear. The fire crackled. Crickets sang. Somewhere in the hills a wolf howled once, long and lonely. Emma broke the silence. I've been thinking about the papers. Kai turned. What about them? They have names, orders, land theft, enough to expose everything. He studied her. But it'll cost you. I know. My father will never forgive me. Kai looked at the flames. Sometimes when the cedar cracks, it's not because it's broken. It's because it's releasing what's inside. She turned the phrase over in her mind. So you think it's worth it? He met her gaze. I think some trees only grow after fire. They left Willow's Hollow 2 days later, traveling by night, skirting the hills where army patrols wouldn't search, Emma carried the satchel pressed close to her ribs. She'd rewritten her own world in those pages, yes. There was no going back. By the third night, they were within sight of the railhead, the place where Randall Givens and Colonel Caldwell had broken bread with investors and bankers. The depot still stood polished wood and shining brass beneath banners that read, Progress, Prosperity, Promise. They watched from the ridge above. He'll be there, Emma said. My father. Kai nodded. And Givens, almost certainly. Kai touched her shoulder. We don't have to go in together. No, she said. We do. I didn't steal this truth just to mail it away. He needs to hear it from my mouth. They descended at dawn. Emma wore the same riding blouse she'd escaped in, dusty, torn, and defiant. Kai walked beside her, head held high. Neither of them looked back. They entered the depot through the rear platform. Inside, soldiers and businessmen milled about, sipping coffee and shouting over telegraphs. Emma spotted her father near the ticket desk, deep in conversation with Givens. She didn't hesitate. Father, she said, voice clear. The colonel turned. His eyes widened. Emma. Hello? She said, stepping forward. I believe we have unfinished business. Randall Givens stood slowly. My dear, what in God's name? Emma held up the satchel. Don't speak to me like I'm still yours to manage. Her father stepped closer. Emma, this is madness. You need rest, no. What I need is for someone to tell the truth. She opened the satchel and drew out the pages, the signed deeds, the orders, the ledger with Kai's name beside the word confess. She handed them to her father. I know what you did, she said. And I won't be quiet. Caldwell's hand trembled as he flipped through the pages. These weren't meant. They were meant to steal land, she snapped. To buy silence. To destroy people who couldn't fight back. The room had gone still. Givens reached for the papers. This is treasonous. You'll destroy your family name. Emma looked at him. You destroyed it, the moment you touched me without asking. Givens flushed red. Kai stepped forward. You have a choice, he said. Bury the truth and become the lie. Or let it burn and see what grows. Caldwell looked at his daughter, not at her clothes or her defiance, but her eyes. And for the first time in years, he saw not a girl, but a woman, forged by pain and purpose. I didn't know how far it had gone, he said. No. Emma said, you chose not to know. He closed the folder and handed it back. Do what you must. She stared at him. This doesn't make us even. No, he said. But maybe it's a start. They walked out of the depot hand in hand. Kai looked at her. What now? She exhaled. Now, we make sure no one else is silenced. The letter was published 3 weeks later. Typed on aged paper, signed in ink and determination, it appeared in the St. Louis Dispatch, and then in other newspapers, Denver, Chicago, San Francisco. The story of stolen tribal lands, false confessions, government silence, and a young woman, daughter of a respected colonel, who had broken ranks to expose it all. Emma Caldwell's name was spoken in drawing rooms and saloons alike. Some cursed her. Others called her a heroine. But she no longer belonged to either world. She and Kai never waited to see the fallout. By the time the first article reached the rail towns, they had crossed the Arizona line and settled deep in New Mexico territory, among the hills south of the Mimbres River, where cottonwoods shimmered in the breeze and the soil turned black after rain. They built their home with their hands, logs, stone cedar for the roof beams. It wasn't much, but it stood solid and square against the wind. Kai hunted. Emma tended a small garden. In time they traded with nearby ranchers, not for coin, but for cloth seed and stories. They didn't speak much of the fort or the depot, or the night they fled through dry brush with fire behind them. But sometimes when the wind shifted and a hawk circled low, Emma would rest her hand over Kai's and say quietly, "We chose fire." And he would nod, because it lit the way. In early spring, a rider arrived, a young man, Apache with skin the color of earth after rain. He brought word from Willow's Hollow. The elder who had welcomed them was dying. She wished to see Kai once more before her spirit passed into the Red Hills. Kai packed his satchel, his eyes soft with something between sorrow and duty. Emma prepared a bundle of sage and cedar bark. For her fire, she said, so she can carry it with her. "You won't come?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "This is your story." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You are part of it." He rode out that night. Emma stood on the porch watching until the moonlight swallowed his silhouette. For 3 days, she kept the fire going. When he returned, his eyes were wet, but his shoulders lighter. She said he whispered, "We did not run from the world. We ran toward the truth." That summer rain came early. The hills bloomed with wild poppies and purple thistle. Quail wandered through the garden. At night, the coyotes howled in chorus. Emma sat on the porch, carving wooden spoons while Kai strung a bow from sinew and juniper. One morning, she held a hand to her belly and felt something new, a flutter, faint, uncertain. She didn't say anything at first. She waited until evening, when the sky turned orange and the hills whispered with cicadas. She took Kai's hand and placed it on her stomach. He looked at her uncertain. Then realization dawned. "You're sure?" he asked. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Yes." He wrapped his arms around her forehead, resting against hers. "We'll teach them truth," he said, "and how to walk between worlds." The child came in winter, born on a night when wind howled down from the mountains and frost rimmed the windows. Emma bore down with every ounce of her will. No midwife, no doctor, just Kai's steady hands and the warmth of the fire. When the baby cried strong, fierce, alive, Emma laughed through her tears. "A girl," Kai whispered, wrapping her in deerhide, "strong as ironwood." They named her Lena after Kai's grandmother, who had sung to the cedars in years of drought and plenty. Lena grew up with dust on her cheeks and stars in her hair. She spoke both English and Apache before she was 5. She ran with bare feet and a wooden bow across hills her ancestors had once called home. Emma told her stories of courage, of betrayal, of a world that feared love between two kinds of people, and how love had chosen fire anyway. Lena listened, her eyes wide. "Were you afraid?" she asked one day. Emma smiled. "Yes, but not of the fire, only of letting someone else put it out." Years passed. They grew older, not quietly but deeply, like roots pushing through stone. News from the outside came and went. The railway expanded. Givens was forced to resign from his post after an inquiry. Colonel Caldwell retired soon after returning to Missouri. He wrote Emma once simply, "I do not ask forgiveness, only peace. May your child never carry what I did not stop." H.Z. Emma never replied. But she kept the letter folded inside the old satchel, next to the papers that had once nearly cost them everything. When Lena turned 10, she asked if they would ever leave the hills. Kai answered, "Only if we have to." Emma added, "But wherever we go, we carry what matters." "And what's that?" Lena asked. "Truth," Kai said. "And fire," Emma whispered. "The kind you choose." And so they stayed in the hills where hawks still soared and cedar cracked in the hearth. In the home they built with bare hands and brave hearts. In a life shaped not by what was taken from them, but by what they had the courage to give. Their story was not written in books, not sung in the towns where trains screamed past. But it lived. In the wind, in the stones, in the girl who ran through wildflowers, carrying her parents' names like twin flames, and in the fire they chose. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this story. I'm truly glad you stayed with me. Your support means so much. Please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel so I can keep bringing you more heartfelt stories like this one.